Welcome, everyone. Good to have you with us as we continue now in the book of Proverbs, book of Mishlei. You'll forgive me, we're having some technical issues, so we're not going to share the screen this evening, but I'm going to give you some basic verses and try to explain to you the meaning of each verse. And we're going to skip around this evening because I want to stick to one common theme, and that is the idea of words. The words, its ramifications, its consequences, etc. One of the most famous things that you learn or people quote in the book of Proverbs, in the book of Mishlei, comes from a verse. It's very interesting. In chapter 18, verse number 21. And that is the following. Here's what it says. And I have it here. I'm reading in the book of Proverbs and read it in Hebrew. I want to read it in Hebrew because it's often misquoted. Here's the quote. Mavet v'chaim biyad lashon. Death and life are in the hands of the tongue. Now, usually when this is quoted, as a matter of fact, according to this translation, which is one of the most accurate translations here, we're using the Proverbs, I believe it's the Sansino Press, one of the most classic translations. And it says death and life are in the power of the tongue. Now, it's not the power. It's in the hand of the tongue. And I'm going to talk about that. What does that mean, that death and life are in the hands of the tongue? So the Talmud comments on this. It says, wait a second, what's going on here? Does the tongue have a hand? The tongue has a hand? I don't think it does. But it comes to teach us, just as the hand could kill, yes, indeed, hands could kill, so can the tongue. The tongue can also kill. So that famous, that famous expression of sticks and stones could break my bones, but names could never hurt me is absolutely false. Names could always hurt someone. They can always kill. That's why we're supposed to be very, very careful how we speak. Okay, so that's what it is coming to tell us. This is something very, very important, that the deadly power of our tongues is emphasized in the book of Proverbs. Very important. So what does it go on to say? I just want to continue here. The ohaveha yochal pirya, and they that indulge it shall eat the fruit thereof. In other words, if you nurture your tongue, if you take your tongue seriously, if you see it as a gift from the Borei Olam, from God, then what? You will be careful not only how you speak, but you will speak beautiful things. You will speak divrei Torah, words of Torah. You'll say things complimenting someone else, etc. But essentially, your words will be words of substance, and therefore you will see the fruit of your labor. In other words, how you treat your tongue, you will be rewarded for that. So that's very, very important to understand. So it goes both ways. We can use the tongue for evil. We could use the tongue for good. Now, it's interesting. If you read the Talmud in Erechim, it says, whoever speaks lashon hara, all right, bad words about someone, God says, he and I cannot inhabit the same world. I can't live in the same world of someone who speaks lashon hara. What is lashon hara? Speaking negatively, unnecessarily about someone else. In other words, gossip just for the sake of speaking gossip about someone else. Listen, sometimes there's something bad going on where it's what we would call litoelet. You have to, it is a strict necessity to speak against someone who's causing problems, or if you believe that there are people, not just friends of yours, but anybody, say, in the community or whoever who could be hurt by a certain individual, you have an obligation to warn people of that particular individual, of the danger of that particular individual. But just to say about a certain individual that, hey, you want to know the juicy gossip about so-and-so's divorce, and you want to know about his or her personal life or things like that, that's simply Lashon Hara. Now, Lashon Hara doesn't necessarily have to be false. It could be completely true. But the thing is, you're speaking negatively about someone unnecessarily. And in rabbinic literature and throughout the Torah, by the way, that is certainly condemned. It is an absolute sin. You see it in the Torah itself that prominent biblical figures were severely punished for the sin of Lashon Hara. You take a look, for example, of 10 of the 12 spies sent by Moses to spy out the land of Israel. As a result of what they had to say, okay, they were punished by death. And then you have Miriam, the sister of Moses, who spoke against Moses on account of his Ethiopian wife. And as a result, she received leprosy. And by the way, another thing I'll tell you about Moses himself. Remember, Moses was not allowed to enter the promised land because when God told him to bring forth water from the rock by speaking to it, he struck it instead. However, according to Rabbi Simon, he was not punished for striking the rock, but rather because he called the Jewish people, what did he call them? Chamorim. He called them rebels. He said they were rebels. So in other words, there was Lashon Hara involved. He was speaking against the Jewish people. Now, listen, he had a hard time with the Jewish people who he was tasked to lead. For sure he did. But nevertheless, he shouldn't have spoken negatively about them. After all, he was the leader. Now, that could always be a challenge. I know myself as a Jewish leader, it's hard sometimes to say good things about the people you're leading. It's a fact. It happens to be true. But nevertheless, what we're trying to emphasize is the dangers of evil speech, the dangers of speaking negatively about others or saying bad things in general. So death and life are in the hands of the tongue. Now, this is true. It's interesting because I had asked somebody about the famous news story that's going on and keeps repeating itself about the politician George Santos, the congressman. And as you well know, he had told some lies in order to get elected to Congress. And I spoke with someone in his district, a gentleman I know for a long time, is a very, very bright individual who's not partisan at all. As a matter of fact, he always looks at everything objectively. He's a former criminal defense attorney. And he said a very interesting thing, and I didn't think of it. He said, yes, it's true. Santos used his tongue to tell lies, and that's not a good thing. But on the other side of the coin, he also used his tongue. He also used words to apologize for his misdeeds. He went on television and publicly apologized to the American people, and particularly the people of his district, for saying things that were not true. And this person, his constituent of Santos, said, you know what, in a world where people are so unapologetic, where people are not ashamed of saying the wrong things, it is certainly praiseworthy, by today's standards anyway, to apologize. Now, by the way, we don't know if the apology is sincere. Judaism teaches us that what's considered to be teshuvah, what is authentic repentance, if someone is faced with the same circumstance again, will the person act the same way? Now, let's take an example here with Santos. If Santos would be interviewed in the future and somebody would say, hey, George, I heard that you were the inventor of Facebook. And Santos says, oh, yes, I was the inventor of Facebook. That's true. We know that's not true, but let's say he says that. Then obviously his apology is insincere. But if Santos says, no, I'm sorry, I cannot take credit for that. I was not the founder of Facebook. Yes, I'm on Facebook. That's true. I may be a bit Facebook-ish, but I did not invent the social platform. Okay? Then already you know that his apology is sincere because he's not repeating the same offense. All right, that's something important. Let's continue. I'm going to speak about another verse now in that same spirit, about, we're talking about Santos, we're talking about sins we commit with the tongue. And another verse in chapter 19, that is chapter 19, the first verse of chapter 19. Okay, what does it say? Tov Rosh Holech Bitumo. Better is the poor person that walks with integrity. All right, comes to the word bitumov, tamim. All right, wholehearted. All right, he's the poor person that walks with integrity. All right, meikesh sifatav vihu chisil. Then someone who is perverse with his lips. Okay, someone who again says bad things, and a fool at the same time. Somebody who doesn't exercise his lips properly, her lips properly, obviously is a fool. But what does it mean, better to be a poor person with integrity? What does that mean? Nobody wants to be poor. Essentially, what it's saying is retain your integrity during difficult times when it looks advantageous to become rich through either telling lies or speaking evil. Don't yield to that temptation. So in other words, keeping on the same theme as somebody like Santos, not just George Santos who lied for self-advancement. It's not only politicians who lie for self-advancement, although you have many of them, all right, many of them who supposedly get away with it. But the average person, unfortunately, tells a lie. And when someone is challenged and asked, why are you lying? Well, I needed to get this position. It's happened. People have lied to my face. Sometimes people will say, you know what, I want to join the Jewish faith. Okay, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that if you're not Jewish, but you want to join the Jewish faith. But sometimes it's joining the Jewish faith just for 5 minutes because a person wanted to appease a certain family member of the other side who was Jewish. And, there was some pressure to convert to Judaism just to have a Jewish wedding. That's not integrity. So you ask a person like that, and it's happened. I've asked a person like that, why did you, obviously you don't want to be Jewish because it's a week later and you may be eating pork and you promised that you're not going to do any of this stuff. So why did you say you want to be Jewish? Well, had I told you the truth, I couldn't have had the Jewish wedding that my fiance had wanted me to have at the time. So people do this all the time. People tell lies to get a job. People tell lies for various different types of advancement. People are going to lie. And that's a terrible, terrible thing. So in other words, it's saying don't become rich on the backs of others. You're hurting other people. And unfortunately, many people who lie actually are lying to themselves. People lie. They're really lying to themselves. And that's one of the worst sins somebody could commit. So integrity is the operative word, coming from the word tamim. Be wholehearted. Tamim tihiyeh im Adonai Elohecha. Thou shalt be wholehearted with the Lord. And that's not an easy task, right? Anytime we see an opportunity, we want to grasp it. And sometimes, we want to bend the truth here and there, etc. But we're not even talking about just a white lie bending truth. People will blatantly tell lies just to get to various places. Obviously, we were talking about George Santos, told lies to get elected. Many people in all parties tell lies to get elected. All right, that happens many, 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 many times. I mentioned this particular case because in this particular instance, media seems to be obsessed with it. All right, tell you another political story very soon as well. Okay, so let's go now to another verse. It'll be our final verse for this evening, and that's in chapter 27, verse number 6. Here we go. Okay, now manim pitzei, ohev, v'natarot, nishikot, sonei. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are considered to be the word here that's used here is importunate. Okay, it's a waste. The kisses of an enemy are a waste. What is this meaning here? Faithful are the wounds of a friend. A friend is somebody who is going to tell you the truth. A friend will tell you that who's ultimately going to tell you the truth. Someone who's just going to patronize and just tell you yes, 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 they're not your friend. From your friend, you want honest feedback. All right. Now, when you talk about honesty, it has to be told nicely. Otherwise, certainly not a friend. A friend could give you constructive feedback. If somebody says, I always knew you were a jerk, so I'm not surprised that your talk or your speech was terrible. No, that's not a friend. A friend could say, listen, I liked your speech, but you know what? There's something else that could also be mentioned here that I think you neglected to mention that perhaps you can mention the next time. I mentioned a speech because I'm a rabbi. So it would be cruel to tell a rabbi that your sermons are horrible. But to tell a rabbi, hey, I think your sermons are good, but I think there's also something else that could be added for the edification of the audience. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. So it's interesting when it comes to lies, comes to truth. There's a question in the Talmud posed to the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai that if there's a bride and the bride is not very appealing, can you tell the bride that she's ugly? So according to Beis Shammai, who is always the more strict or more hard-nosed kind of school of thought, he says, yeah, you have to tell the truth. The truth is the truth. And then according to Beit Hillel said, no. If the bride, there's no mitzvah to tell the bride that she's ugly. You can tell the bride that she's beautiful, even though she's ugly. Right? Because it would be ignoble to do such things. You have to also be a mensch. You have to, operate with a certain degree of diplomacy as well. So that's something to take into account. But in other words, what's important here and what the message is, we must favor clarity, okay, over agreement. I prefer clarity over agreement. Don't promise me something. Don't say yes, 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 yes. And then I come back to you and say, what happened? You were supposed to perform a certain task. Oh, sorry, come up with all kinds of excuses. No. You can't do something. Say, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Or I disagree with you, no, I don't think this is the way to go. It's very important. The other political story goes back a long, long time ago. Remember George Bush Sr., all right? Olav Sholem, a blessed memory, he had passed away a few years ago. George H.W. Bush, in 1988, ran against a fellow by the name of Michael Dukakis, I believe. And Dukakis was pretty vocal about raising taxes. Everybody knew that. Bush said, no, read my lips, no new taxes. And what happened? He raised taxes. That's what happened. It was a famous thing. So Dukakis came along and said, listen, what's going on here? George H. Bush, he said that he was not going to raise taxes. I said I would do it. So you know what? He got elected over a lie. The only difference between me and him, we both wanted to raise taxes. So the only difference between me and him is that Dukakis, was honest about it. Bush lied about it. We both wanted to raise taxes. Now, raising taxes is not a very good thing, but I thought that was very interesting. I think about it here. Clarity over agreement is what is important. Say what you mean and mean what you say. You're not doing anybody a favor by promising one thing or saying one thing or yesing somebody to death. You must tell people the truth. It is a very, very important thing. even as we said before, even if you're going to be poor because of it. So I thought that was a very, very interesting thing that this analogy to politics. And I thought perhaps in mentioning the George Santos situation, I thought that, perhaps you can see it in a different way as well. There's always, I could just repeat to you whatever the media is telling you, and that wouldn't help you very much. But I thought it was very interesting what my friend had to say, the analysis that he gave about him and about politicians. But forget about that. It's about the average person. The average person. It's about you and me maintaining integrity, being honest with each other, even when the truth may hurt. Yeah, the truth hurts sometimes, but it's always important to be honest, to be diplomatic about it. We don't have to go crazy and yell at each other, but important to exchange views honestly and with integrity. So I thank you very much for listening to this session about words. And speaking of words, I hope you'll give me some feedback on social media, on YouTube. Please subscribe to our channel. Please feel free to leave comments. And next time, we're going to speak about the topic of humility. And looking forward to seeing you again. And looking forward to hearing your thoughts. So thank you very, very much for tuning in.